think I've said from a million of these meetings, if my neighbors are looking in through my window, they must think I'm drunk again because they see me sitting here with a jacket and tie on talking to the air. They have no clue what I'm involved in. They must be saying, there he goes again. He's drunk again. But it's an interesting format. We have opened up some meetings down here, some of our clubhouses, and it's nothing is like being face to face with each other. And so I'm hoping we get all back to normal again. But here we are. And thank you, Jim, for having me here. June 23rd, 1988 was my separation from alcohol. And I'm very grateful to be a recovered member of a sacred fellowship called Alcoholics Anonymous, to be a member in good standing and to be able to uphold the traditions as well as the tradition of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, I'll say this on the front end. For years in Alcoholics Anonymous, I would tell you from behind the podium or when I was sharing from the room, and I meant it sincerely from my heart, how hard I've been working to prove to you that I want to be good and I want to be sober, and I'm really working hard at this recovery, and I'm working hard at getting to meetings and sponsoring people, and I am working hard. And what I have found out waking up spiritually and hopefully on most days living in the sunlight of the Spirit, that my new truth has changed. There's something that goes, the truth is true until we find out a new truth. And my new truth came with one of these aha moments, these realization moments, that for me, my reality is I've done nothing for my recovery. I've done absolutely nothing. I did a whole lot to wreck my life for a lot of years, drinking and taking non-conference approved dry goods. And on June 23rd, 1988, a loving God gave me a gift of desperation and kind of split me open, figuratively speaking, and allowed his light to get in. And only when I'm broken open, even in sobriety, can God's light get in. And God gave me a gift of desperation and a willingness and an endurance to follow instructions and put me in Alcoholics Anonymous. And as Richard says, my bottom was a sense of falling up into your arms in Alcoholics Anonymous. And what AA has done for me has fed me. And God gave me a gift of willingness. And as I said, endurance, encouragement, and direction to take your instructions from you so I can get here today and share the good news. The jacket I'm wearing, the tie I have, the shirt I'm wearing, the desk I'm sitting at, the apartment I live in, my relationship with Mary, the computer I'm speaking to, my job, my car, everything I owe to Alcoholics Anonymous and God, because I needed a committee meeting to tie my sneakers in the morning when I was drinking. And all of this, and I'm very clear on that, has been given to me in some sense by you and a loving God. So I owe everything to Alcoholics Anonymous. And, you know, the business I'm in, I take a lot of hits from, believe it or not, from this spiritual entity called AA by some AA members who despise what I do for a living. I help people who come in from detox and try to get them upright and back to AA. And even with those kind of hits that I take from folks in AA, I'm still able to chop wood and carry water and do what God has for me. And the sense of who I am as awakening through the 12 steps is not derived from outside sources or other people's opinions of me. And there's some wonderful things that are said, but I cannot get attached to that. The sense of who I am must come from God. And to some degree, I always have to take a look at, have I lost contact with step one? Have I gotten so far away from step one that I forgot I need power? And I found over and over and over again, a lot of folks who come to me for help with double-digit sobriety, they've gotten far away from step one rather than going through the steps, which drives us deeper into step one and the need for power of myself, I am nothing, the Father doeth the works. So our book talks about turning all things into the Father of light who presides over us all. You know, what does that currently look like for me? Not in what I say, but what I do. Spirituality doesn't touch every single area of my life. It touches none of my life because I got real clear alcoholism hit every single area of my life. My alcoholism gets a life by taking mine. And although I haven't thought about a drink for a long time now, thank you, God, the drink, my alcoholism is always thinking about me because my alcoholism doesn't come in a bottle of whiskey. My alcoholism sits right up here in the head and is always plotting, is always working around, is always maneuvering. My alcoholism will go underground and resurface in other areas. They're called sex sprees and food sprees and money sprees and thinking sprees and fear sprees and all sorts of sprees because I cannot sit in the present moment. I'm attached to remorse and guilt and resentments from the past, and I'm so worried about the future. And my mind knows exactly what the future is going to look like. It has exactly how it's going to play out. And I wake up at 5 a.m. usually every single morning, and there's times at 5:02 I'm in an argument, a heated debate with someone, and I haven't even got out of bed yet. And that's what my mind looks to do. There's been many times when I'm praying, I believe I'm Moses, and by the time I get on the road, I'm Rambo. And this is the great predator called the thinking mind. So my job is to practice fidelity to God, to seek God with the desperation of a drowning man, not to even tell you about it unless there's an invitation to talk about it, but just to be of service to Him and those around me. And what God has done for my life, there's been a lot of valleys and a lot of peaks and a lot of where are you sending me now, God? But we live life forward and understand it backwards. And I heard someone talk, Chuck C, say on a cassette one time that really got my attention, and it has stayed with me. That my job is not to take care of myself, and I always thought it was. My job is not to take care of myself. That's God's job. My job is to seek God's will and ask Him for the power to carry it out. And I think about the last 32 years, God is keeps me coming back and keeps me upright and sober. In 32 years that I'm sober, I've never asked anyone to keep me sober for the day other than God. And for 32 years, I asked God on awakening, please, Father, keep me sober for the day, and I'm still here. So there is something to that. No human power could relieve me of my alcoholism. God could and would if He was sought. This AA is a path of illumination, and the 12 steps illuminate the path. What a tremendous way to live. That I can get to, depending on where I am spiritually, I can get to, and I don't do this perfect. I'm not a model or an example of any AA. I'm just here to share my story. But depending on spiritual muscles, I get to live in spirit with inspiration to be inspired. And that is far away from anything my mind has to tell me. It's those things, Marion, my better half, always says, God puts something on our heart, whether it's through meditation, through prayer, working with someone, and sometimes you just get those aha moments. God lays something on our heart that we don't need to write down because it's imprinted, it stays with us. And that's just simply the world of the spirit. June 23rd, 1988, separated from alcohol, and I had no clue what was happening to me. I just knew on that particular day, I couldn't have imagined life without a drink. And I kept thinking, if I get a drink in me, I'm going to die. Now, if I don't get a drink in me, I'm going to die. What do I do? I had been through 6 treatment centers. I had been to AA meetings. I showed up in AA about a half a dozen times drunk, and I would raise my hand and critique the room and critique the speaker with a lot of inappropriate language. And the only thing AAs did would say, keep coming back. I remember some people giving me their phone numbers, which I was kind of hoping they would just throw me out so I had an excuse not to come back. But I says, what is with these people? If I said these things to anyone else in the street, I would have got beat up. And they just said, keep coming back. In my mind, I knew AA wasn't the place for me. It wasn't going to work. I knew AA was for very special people, not me. And I thought it was a bit of a cult. And I tried my religious program, my religious community. I'm a Catholic, and I had lots of contempt about that. When I was 14, my mom, who was a pretty good church member, committed suicide. She was full-blown alcoholic, addicted to pills with some side psych issues. And I said, well, what about this God? And my family took me to treatment and therapists, and I just kept getting drunk. Even when I knew drinking was a bad idea, I'd get out of treatment and get drunk. I never picked up the first drink drunk. I always picked up the first drink sober and detox. What is going on with me? On this particular day, I begged the very same God I had mocked and spat at for so long that I really didn't think he wanted anything to do with me. I thought he was cruel. I thought he was unjust. I thought God was for only women and children. Men don't need God. Men need to be like John Wayne. And on June 23rd, 1980, I begged that very same God for mercy. And I remember these words like it happened a day ago. It was, please take me from this. I don't want to die. I wasn't thinking about Alcoholics Anonymous or going back to another treatment center. I just don't want to die. And how dark it is before the dawn. So one of the realizations I got is my thought life and my life look the same. Or do I think they're separate? Because very often I would think my life and what I'm thinking is two separate entities. It's the very same thing. My thought life manifests in everything I do. And that had to stop, but I didn't have the power to do it. But up until June 23rd, 1980, my mind owned me. I mean, there were plenty of times when I knew getting out of a treatment center that going to buy alcohol was a really bad idea, but I could not stop it, because my mind would convince me to buy the lie every time, and the truth left me at that store. That'll happen to me in recovery when my mind says, you don't need to pray today. You prayed last week. You prayed yesterday. I can't tell you how many times I get back from a conference and I get home, it's Sunday night, it's 11:30 or midnight. I flew across the country. I'm exhausted. And the only thing I want to do is get home to Mary and have something to eat, wash the day off of me, get the plane off me, and go to bed. And my mind says, hey, you deserve a night off from not praying. After all, you just did a whole conference. And then tomorrow morning, the mind will tell me, you don't need to pray because you just did a conference. And the day after that, and the day after that. And little by slowly, I start this wedge between me and this God. So I pray for the willingness to go to any lengths every day. In this hallway, I begged God to take me from this. I don't want to die. And he gave me this moment of clarity that we hear a lot about in Alcoholics Anonymous, this wholeness of mind where I was completely out of my mind for a brief moment. And I pray, and if I had a prayer for everyone in this room, it'd be that you lose your mind and it never returns, because when I'm in my mind is the misery manufacturer goes back to work and causes nothing but problems, fear and resentments and woulda, coulda, shouldas all day long. Yeah. And for a brief moment, I was completely out of my mind, and I heard this voice that I never heard before. Please take me from this. I don't want to die. And the voice said, enough, I have other work for you to do. And I said, what is this about? I'm living in the back of an abandoned building in Lower Manhattan. It was filthy. There was no one in there other than an occasional wino or dope fiend that would roll through. There's no one in this hallway in this day, and I hear this voice, and I say, oh my God, I've lost my mind. And the good news is I lost my mind for a brief moment. But my experiences have proved to me it's when I'm detached from my mind or I'm out of my mind, can I hear that voice? That doesn't mean God's not talking to me, because he's talking to all of us all the time. The way my experience has shown, God is constantly here to seek and to save, is pursuing every one of us, begging to have a relationship with us. It is incredibly patient with all of us. But every once in a while, something happens and I back up, usually in my weakest moment, my most vulnerable moment, my most transparent moment, when I feel, oh my God, everything's going to fall through. Suddenly, I find God's strength. So June 23rd, 1988, which kind of put me on the path of recovery, although it felt like the worst moment in my life, it was when the light got turned on, the ignition key rolled over, where the spiritual transformation began. It didn't feel golly, it didn't sound golly, it didn't look golly, but it's when it began. And that kind of God interrupting my death and interrupting my life can pursue me until God calls me home. I just need to be awake enough to pay attention to it. Has life become my master? where I have to do this and I have to do that and I have to do this and I have to do that. And somewhere on the 15th on the list is let me go talk to God for a little while. I've done those things and I hit the wall. I put things before God and I start to travel heavy. I got obligations here and I have to be there and I'll get to God and I'll get to God and suddenly I'm not getting to God and I'm traveling heavy again. And my traveling heavy is the mind has taken over and I become a slave to the mind rather than serving God. I got placed in my seventh treatment center in June of '88. And I like to tell you I was a perfect AA member from day one, but I was untreated. In my first 6 months in Alcoholics Anonymous, I was not a poster child for recovery. Now I don't want to be a poster child for recovery. But my first 6 months, I was experiencing food sprees and sex sprees and fear sprees. I was not okay. And I'm going to meetings, but I'm not okay just going to meetings. I was getting information, but I was lacking transformation. Where do I go? And thank the good Lord, some folks out there took me to a meeting called the Three Legacies meeting in Minneapolis, Minnesota. This was a Friday night meeting. It held about 300 people, and everyone was suited up. Everyone was dressed proper, which scared the heck out of me, but I wanted that. How do you look like that? How do you sound this way? And when they got to the podium, they talked about living in all three sides of our triangle. They talked about what it was like, what happened, what it's like now. And it's just so attractive to me. But how do you get there? Where's the secret potion? And there was none. It was in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which it was hidden in a lot of meetings I would go to. And through desperation, God puts teachers in my life, and suddenly I see them, and they started to show me this book and talk to me and spend time with me. God bless our old timers. And about a year later, I was brought home to I'm an old Brooklyn, New York boy. I was brought to my first home group, the Free Spirit group, and I found my first teacher. And he wasn't well liked in my part of the neighborhood because he was into the big book, supporting our traditions and living on all three sides of the triangle. He was not a popular guy, but my spirit led me to him. He was very popular with my spirit because he was feeding me information I never heard before. And I'm so grateful God kept me hungry and still excited and passionate about him, this power called God, and our sacred fellowship, Alcoholics Anonymous. I call it sacred because it is. And if we're around long enough, we will see with our own eyes lives get reborn and resurrected for fun and for free. We don't need an insurance policy. We don't need money to get free because the soul can't be bought. Yeah, the soul belongs to God. And he puts it in the hands of other AA members because he trusts the work we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to be right in the middle of this, because I've had wonderful experiences in AA and I have incredible challenges in AA, and God is always in the middle of it and consistent and always loving. I went to God in all my brokenness, and he keeps redeeming me. And not only does that, he removes the guilt of my own sin, where I can get free in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's way beyond going to a meeting. It's way beyond the sponsor and the 12 steps. Those are vehicles to get me experience this power called God right in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous for fun and for free. And all I need to do is practice fidelity. That's not much to do. It's like kissing a newborn on the cheek compared to the work and the slave kind of work I had to do for the next drink, lying and cheating and manipulating and stealing and breaking the law and covering up. And it went on and on and on. And in 1988, I was living like a bum, literally in the street with the same clothes on for about 6 months. In the same environment. I was filthy when my dad found me standing on a street corner in 1988. I mean, I had pants that were bloodstained and soiled. I was wearing construction boots, and the right boot was missing the front. My fingernails, my hands were filthy. I had a turtleneck and a jacket on. I was cold and sweating at the same time because I was going through withdrawals. I'm running around with hepatitis C. I'm urinating blood, and I weigh about 130 pounds on a good day. I'm dying of alcoholism and my mind was not done yet. My mind wants me dead, will settle for me drunk. I was at the mercy of King Alcohol. See, the mind overrides everything, even sobriety, except this power called God. I have to be a fool not to seek God. Not when I have a life threatening illness that is not interested in me being sober 32 years. It couldn't care. It'll get me now. And I'll bleed out from 1,000 cuts rather than one big wound. Just little erosion of the spiritual path. No meditation, no prayer, no inventory, no sponsor, no meetings, no sponsees, little by slowly. And I go backwards through the steps, and then you hear about me, God forbid. So this path, Jim asked me to kind of talk a little bit about this growing and understanding and effectiveness, being on the spiritual path, walking with the hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. When our fifth step promises talk about hand in hand with the spirit of the universe, Bill is just the big book has been downloaded into Bill. It's incredible. Hand in hand. When I shake someone's hand, there's no space between us. We're met. We're joined together. Hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. There's no separation. There's no two-ness. There's just oneness. And we get to experience that with God. And I get to enhance the experience that was so freely given to me. And it goes back to step one. How desperate am I? Now, the drink is off my back for a long time, but I haven't gotten disconnected from step one. And I love the effect produced by God and the 12 steps in our fellowship. I was looking forward to getting here at noon. Marion's in Washington. I don't cook, so I've been starving for the last 4 days, just to let you know. I boil a good pot of water, I got to tell you that. And so 12:15, I pushed Mass back till tonight. I was really excited just to get around and see some faces in AA because I miss you guys so much. I have a life of prayer, meditation. I don't do it perfect, but on awakening, I begin to pray while I'm lying in bed. And I take a few minutes when I get out of bed and ask God, I'm ready to go to work. What do you need me to do today? And then I come to my left here. I have this little altar and meditation mat, and I drop to my knees because I'm bended knee, though I seek my God, and I make some prayers, centering prayers, because I can't command the spirit. And I pray for many folks. And I ask God for the power to carry out what He has for me today. And I go into sacred silence. I go into silence to hear and darkness to see in meditation. I commune. I have found on this road, it's important that I seek solitude with God. I commune with God because this mind is always going and trying to get me away from that. What kind of bondage and difficulties can it present to me? My job is to starve the ego and to feed the spirit. For so long, I would feed the ego and not even pay attention to the spirit. I have a sponsor. His name is Mickey Mustard out of Denver, Colorado. I'm very grateful that this gentleman is in my life. He's been forming, and I attribute him to getting me back to my religious community again, which has really opened up the doors for me, and a daily surrender. The spirit of surrender is an expression of truth and my truest form of beingness. Surrender, a daily surrender to what is. At 14 years old, I'm growing up in Brooklyn, New York. And back in the 60s, it was kind of a cool place to grow up. It was kind of like the country. It was a time where you could leave your bicycle outside and you go for bike rides with your friends, and your parents didn't have to follow you or pick you up from school. Like nowadays, the neighbors would come out in the summertime and make coffee and sit out on the sidewalk under the street lights. And it was just kind of like living in the country. It was a fun time. And then MTV ruined everything in the 80s. I think they came out and they won everything. But from the outside, my family looked like it was a pretty cool family, and it was. My dad he was a powerful man, always had money. He dressed to the nines. He was a street smart man. My mom was really attractive woman. We lived in a nice house. My dad had the Cadillac outside, the new Cadillac every year. And then my mom dressed my brothers and myself really nice to go to school. From outward appearances, wow, this looks like a really cool family until you went inside and you heard the noise. My mom was alcoholic and passed out many times. I'd come home from school at 3 o'clock, and she'd be blind drunk and sit me up on her lap and tell me how much she wanted to die. This is not good for a 6 or 7 or 8-year-old kid to hear. Or coming home from school, my poor mom was so sick with alcoholism, she'd have a nightgown on, a robe on, and it wasn't closed properly. And I'd see her on the couch passed out, and I'd have to cover her up. That's not a good scene for a little boy. It was really uncomfortable because I was so afraid if dad got home and found her, there'd be hell to pay in my house. Around ages 8 to 10, there was somebody I always referred to as a distant relative that was doing things to me he should have been arrested and locked up for. And I was walking around with a lot of dirty feelings inside of me and just horror inside of me. And watching this woman get sick and sicker. And in January 1974, she took her life. And my design for living was gone. And I was already in a place of life hurts. And I can tell you in recovery, I don't care how long I'm sober, life continues to hurt if I'm not spiritually fit. It's problematic. It's unfair. We look at the state of the world right now, it's like everything got turned upside down. Violence is okay thing nowadays. What is going on? How do I navigate through that? It hurts. And we live in a world of impermanence. Nothing stays forever. So at 14 years old, I'm already feeling the weight of the world. I got 2 heavy boulders on my back with lots of guilt and shame and remorse. And being so alcoholic, as painful and gut wrenching as my mom's passing was, I was also just as concerned what people in the neighborhood thought about me, that my mom committed suicide. I'd walk into the classroom and there'd be a hush over the room. I knew they were talking about me. It better be good. But my mom was second now in my priorities. My first priority is I got to look good and sound good and be good. That followed me right into Alcoholics Anonymous because when I'm separated from alcohol, it doesn't mean I'm much better. It's great. I'm not drinking, but I'm not much better because I have alcoholism, not alcoholism. And one Saturday night, it was spring, summertime, and the older guys that I would hang out with, these were men, worldly guys, insightful men. They knew about the birds and the bees. They were about 16, and they were drinking on the corner, and they were drinking Colt 45 beer, and they just seemed to be having a good time. Listen to music. Those little radios used to put out with the batteries inside. This is way before cell phones and all that other good stuff. And they were drinking beer, and there was some activity going on. There were girls on the corner, and my friends were roughhousing and talking to the girls. And I'm walking around with this stuff. I got ickiness all over me. I got to tell you, growing up, God gave me some gifts, and one of them was music. I was really good in school. I was a good little athlete, but God gave me a gift of being a musician. For the time I was a little guy, it was as if I was born with drumsticks in my hand. I just knew how to play piano. I could write. I was doing a lot of things. I was playing jazz music at like 10 years old, and my family wanted to send me to Juilliard music, and there's all these accolades I was getting for my music, and no matter how big the accolades, how loud the accolades were, inside it's still not good enough. It just didn't fix me. And at 14 years old, I grabbed a quart of beer that night, and I don't know why, but I just grabbed a quart of beer, and I'd never been drunk before. And halfway down that quart of beer, I was feeling different. I was feeling really nice about a lot of things. And by the time I finished my first quart of beer, I'd never been drunk. I was drunk, but wasn't a bad drunk in my mind. It was a euphoric drunk because all the pieces came together and all the hurt went away. Yeah. The pain of my mom was gone. The terrible fear I had growing up around my dad, gone. All the ickiness that happened to me as a little boy gone. I was present to the moment. Bill says it best. I had arrived. I found a sense of ease and comfort I never experienced before. I also got to be taller and better looking. I had muscles, and every girl on the corner wanted me in the worst way. The drunker I got, and don't laugh at that. Come on, give me a break here. And the guys became like my guys, and you know, Mickey Mantle, I was my hero growing up, and I wanted to play center field for the Yankees. I wanted to make music, but there was something about putting on a Yankee uniform, growing up a Yankee fan, number 7 on my back. I was going to be the new Mickey Mantle. And when I got drunk, I had a shift in perceptions. Clancy calls it a disease of perceptions. There was a shift that baseball was for kids. Baseball was for sissies. I want to be like those guys I always see down the block, the guys with the big pinky rings, the wad of money, the fancy cars, that dress well. I want to be a gangster. That's being a real man. And my sense of self was already being derived from outside influences. See, I think I'm going to go on a path that I think I need to go on. I'm going to pursue money, property, and prestige. I'm going to pursue this career. I'm going to hang out with these people because it makes me feel good. And that's the path I have to go on. And then one day I wake up, it's the wrong path. God had me on wants me on a completely different path. No wonder why I never felt really ease and comfort on that path or full contentment because I'm on the wrong road. And the thing about waking up spiritually is I'm open to wherever God wants to send me because that's who I work for. And whether I have an abundance or just enough to get by, something about living in his light, it's really okay. See, step 3 says he'll provide, when we keep close to God, he'll provide me with what I need. But the mind wants more than God's giving. And there's my problem. The mind says I should have more. I should have a bigger car. I should have a bigger house. I should have more money. I should have more of everything. And God saying, no, that's not the way I want you here. All I need to do is keep close to God. And what I found out, I've always been close to God. When I was drinking in the back of an abandoned building, a homeless bum, I was just as close to God then as I am with you this morning. The difference was I woke up to the nearness of my Creator. The crackhead right now, the dope fiend and some shooting gown, the bum on a Bowery right now has just as much God as I do or we do this morning. The difference is hopefully we wake up to the nearness of our Creator and that cat is in the dark about it. But that same person could be sponsoring me next week. Who knows? I stepped onto a road paved right to hell and I didn't see it coming. No consequences when I got drunk. It was a great night. And the following weekend, I got drunk. And I landed in my first treatment center. And I'll tell you how I got there. After a number of years of drinking, I'm still a kid. I'm out there about 4 years or 5, whatever it was, and 18 years old. I remember I'm going into my first treatment center because what I did was I was suffering from alcoholism, active alcoholism. I can suffer from untreated alcoholism nowadays, being sober, but I was actively alcoholic. And what I do, like a good alcoholic, I need money, but God forbid I should get a job. See, I'd rather steal and do illegal things because I got things to do and work is going to take up a lot of my time. I still can't believe I report to work 5 days a week, and give a good day's work. This is like a miracle of, and so I was stealing from people who trusted me and loved me, and that's my family. And I stole from the wrong person one day. It was my dad. I was stealing out of his checkbook and forging his name on a check and going down to the local store. They all knew my dad. And although they were suspect of my story, they just didn't want to deal with him. I kid around about my dad. If anyone has ever seen the movie Goodfellas, remember that Robert De Niro character? That was my dad. And I didn't want to deal with him, and they didn't want to deal with him. So I cashed his check. They give me $20, and I thought I hit the lottery because I never knew. I'm about as sharp as a bowling ball. That when you cash a check, eventually all those checks go back to the owner. See, I thought when you cash a check, they disappeared into space. So when I got away with it once, I went back again and again and again. And then I made a call home, and my kid brother says, "What did you do now? The old man is looking for you." And I knew what I did. He got the checking statement back. My alcoholism doesn't give me a sense, a seed of compassion or integrity. It removes everything. It turns me into this thing. And all I can think of, what is his problem? He has plenty of money. I could not grasp, my mind would not get a hold of, I just stole from my dad. And I've been stealing from my brothers, and I've been stealing from my grandparents. And so when my dad caught me, I went to my first treatment center. I had not conceded to my innermost self I was alcoholic. But alcoholism was getting a life by taking mine. It bore a hole in me and was taking over. My mind constantly creating illusions about myself, which blocked me from the truth, God's truth. It'll still do that. And I did 28 days in this treatment center. And, I went to these little groups. I talked about my feelings and I talked about my issues. And by the time I got discharged, I needed to drink more than the time I went in. I fell in love about 17 times in 28 days. I was playing these rehab romances, the names of our children. I'm doing push ups and sit ups, and I'm good to go. And I get out, I'm drunk in an hour. And I'll just share this with you because I got about 10 more minutes here, I think, 15 more minutes. I've been through 7 times put in a treatment center. And in my first 6 treatment centers over a number of years, what I was able to pull off as far as sobriety goes on my own was a total of 2 days of continuous sobriety because lack of power is my dilemma. I didn't know it then, but I know now because we live life forward and understand it backwards. I was experiencing the depth of what step one is talking about because I was living it. When I look back over my life and I look at the step one and its considerations in 43 pages in the book that it talks about it, and 2343 talks about this predator called the mind, experientially, I identify. Because 6 treatment centers, my first 6, I come up with 2 days of continuous sobriety because I would leave treatment and be bombed in an hour. I'm drunk in an hour. I leave treatment, go to the liquor store. Except for my 5th treatment center, which coincidentally, up until that point, was the longest I've stayed in a treatment center. And that was a grand total of 9 weeks. And this is back in the 80s when they put you in for 28 days and discharge you. They said, "We can't discharge you. You're very sick." So after 9 weeks of being in a treatment facility, when they discharged me on a Saturday morning, my body doesn't need alcohol. My mind thought it didn't need God. And when they're about to discharge me, I'm feeling pretty good. I put on some weight. I'm feeling like I know what I need to do. I don't know what to do. I don't have a clue what to do. But my mind is convincing me it knows what to do. And my body was as sober as ever going to be. I was physically detoxed. My body's as sober as it's ever going to be. You can't get the body more sober than sober. The problem is the mind is creating all the problems. And the only way I can get a new mind is through a spiritual transformation. I don't know about this. By treatment centers, I don't know about this. I don't even know what step one talks about. I don't even know who Bill and Bob are. I just go to treatment, do the spin dry, and get out, except for this one. And so I get home. And I will tell you, when I hit the fresh air, all the voices in the head woke up. I noticed the world was going awfully fast and being in the treatment center. People don't care. I just got out of treatment. The world didn't stop because Pete Marinelli got out of treatment. And I was restless, and discontented. I was anxious. I was uncomfortable. And 2 days at my dad's house with my younger brothers, and I'm not lying when I tell you, I was in a place where I couldn't even carry on a conversation with someone because I was fidgety. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I was just turning and tossing all night long because there was a voice in my head that said, "We need a drink just to take the edge off. If not a drink, just a bump, a pill. I need something just to take the edge off because this thing called life is way out of my league. I can't do this." And on Monday morning, I could not take it. And this is where I met my own demons, guys. I got in my car and drove all the way to an area called South Brooklyn to a liquor store I would frequent often, except I drove out there so early, nothing was open yet. And I got out of my car and my mind told me, we are just going to get a pint of whiskey, get back in the car and drive home. A pint of whiskey, that's it. When I was sitting in treatment, it didn't tell me that. When I hit the fresh air, this is the game plan. My mind told me, we're just going to get a pint of whiskey, get in the car, and drive home, disregarding the danger of drinking and driving. Although back then it wasn't as important as we talk about it nowadays. Going to get a pint of whiskey, get in the car, and drive home. Well, I got out of the car and the liquor store was not open, so I began to pace back and forth on the sidewalk, chasing my own tail. And what begins to happen to me is alcoholism. The obsession to drink was so loud that it began to get painful. Now follow me on this. My head is screaming, we really need a drink. I need a drink. I really need to get a drink. Suddenly, my body is starting to feel funny. My belly is upset. My chest is vibrating. My forehead is sweating. My hands are clammy. Now my hands are shaking. There was no need for this, but the mind said, yeah, we need a drink, to the point where I'm feeling physically ill, like I need a drink. I felt like I was going through withdrawal, and I was not. Now I had to get a drink. The decision to drink was made for me. There was no choice involved in this. And secretly, way back in the back in my soul, was this is a really bad idea. But I got a drink, and I buy a pint of whiskey, and I drink it down as fast as I can. And then I can breathe. Okay, I'm good. The chest stopped shaking, the hands stopped shaking, the belly settled down. I felt in control and powerful again. Except I'm an alcoholic, so I needed to buy a second pint of whiskey. Huh? And when I finish the second pint of whiskey, I need more whiskey. And when I'm drunk, I like to eat pills. And my car sat there for about 4 days. When the big book says, thus started one more journey to the silent for Jim, another journey to hell for me. And here's the thing, I didn't see it coming. So I haven't thought about a drink in a long time, but the drink is thinking about me and I can't see it coming. The same thing with God. I pray, but sometimes I can't see God coming. Sometimes he just shows up and splits the seas for me. And sometimes that can be earth-shattering, like, oh my God, a change needs to be made here. Or sometimes it's this incredible euphoria that we get to see things abundantly clear. But I can't see either coming because I'm relying on a really small instrument, my mind, which I've turned into God many times. And trapdoors have trapdoors. And I would sleep around and bounce around. And I spent 36 hours in my 6th treatment center and walked out the door because I couldn't take the detox. I couldn't take the confinement. And besides, who am I kidding? I'm only going to die a drunk anyway, so let's just get this over. Suicide looked like a good way to go. And I tried that in some flea bag motel, downing a whole bunch of pills because I did not want to live. Bill says it best. The courage to do battle was not there. To do battle. I'm not partying. I'm doing battle every day to stay drunk. It was torture. Whether it's Park Avenue or Park Bench, it's torture. And whether it's Park Avenue or Park Bench, it's the emotional bottom when God hits the soul that gets all our attention, drunk or sober. And so I lingered out there for a while, and I found this abandoned building. And June 23rd, 1988 showed up, and I didn't even know it was June 23rd, 1988. I'm sitting in the detox center, and they're doing this thing called intake and assessment. And some nurse or tech said to me, you should hold on to that date. That's your sober date. I want to throw a chair across the room as if that's important to me, as if I'm really going to stay sober as much as I wanted to. My mind says it's never going to happen. My mind does not speak nicely to me. Where God has brought me nowadays is looking to see the all of God in everything, to have a life of prayer and practice of living in the presence of God, to living in, as a book talks about, the world of the Spirit. And it's not perfect. I write inventory a lot because of my mistakes. Something in scripture says, I'm weak flesh, sold unto the slavery of sin. The things I do, I'm supposed to do, I don't. The things I don't want to do, I do. I miss the mark very often, but every day, my willingness to live in that light, my willingness to serve another drunk, my willingness to go to work, my willingness to do what's right as God sees fit. And often it's not popular. I've gone to a lot of AA meetings. I've been to a million conferences, and sometimes I sit in a conference and Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I'm sitting there, and God has talked about maybe once. You go to a local home group, God's talked about, sometimes never. And so sometimes talking about this book and talking about the God doesn't make me popular. Sometimes career choices don't make us popular. Sometimes where we live doesn't make us popular. But I need to understand, who am I working for? I'd rather bear the pain of waiting for God than bear the pain of going on without. I've gone without for a long time. I know what that feels like. And sometimes you just get open and transparent and you feel really vulnerable on this path. But yet we're so much more useful to God and people around us. Because what do we do? My experience in AA, when speaker shares what it was like, what happened, what it's like now, what it was like, it's a shared brokenness. We're identifying with each other. Your fears, your drinking, your disappointments, you're missing the mark, all of that stuff. We get it. I get it. It's shared brokenness that we meet. Alcohol is about my common problem. And then we talk about the good news, how we got out from under. And not perfect, but how we get out from under, that people like us can walk head up and shoulder square with dignity and integrity and respect, all because of Alcoholics Anonymous and this loving God. Who does it perfect? I haven't met anyone yet, unless they're lying. But we chop wood and carry water, and chop wood and carry water. And this God carries his water in broken pots, and that's me. My AA, for me, is a room full of those broken toys. Little missing parts, missing batteries. It's cracked on this side. I'm the car that leaks oil. But somehow together, I lean on you, you lean on me. I'm speaking this morning. Later on, someone else is speaking. I'll be listening. And it's reciprocal. We go back and forth. The sacred rooms of AA. I hope, service to me is so important, what we get to do, but I'm clear I can't do service without having a God. And sometimes when I get God, I do service, and in service, I get God. Go figure. It's one of those things that don't make sense to a mind, but we know what it is. It's called living in the world of the Spirit. I'm very grateful on the days where I can live away from thought, when I can live in this moment, where pride is not attacking me and ego is not attacking me and what people think about me. I'm here to play the role I think you want me to play. What traffic, what bondage. And I found the freedom is when I just be me, with all the mistakes and all the warts and all the cracks in the armor. People seem to appreciate that more than me trying to, pretend to be something that God didn't make. And so in 1980, I had to get sober. And a few years later, I get married. I marry an alcoholic. Who would have thought? Full blown infidelity, not coming home at night. I'm wondering what happened to my life. God, why are you doing this to me? Having doubt and skepticism. And my sponsor at the time was Mark Houston. I stayed as close to him as I could, and we kept going through the steps once a year. and surrendering my life to God. Take my soul once again, even though this marriage is blowing up. And I doubted myself as a man who couldn't keep his woman. I doubted myself as an AA member who was getting divorced. And when I got divorced, she took everything, and I'm flat broken out of work. My boyfriend moves into the house. I'm going, what? This is recovery. I go through the steps. My sponsor says, go help people, go help people, go help people, be of service. And you know what? I got through that. And God was doing for me what I couldn't do for myself because that relationship was obviously over. And I walked into it and I walked out of it because of God and AA with head up and shoulders square with a little bit of integrity. And it was a valley I hope to never see again, but I went in and out. And not once did my mind tell me we need a drink or any kind of non-conference approved dry goods. What my spirit says is, come back home to me. And that's what I did. And so my goal, my hope is to stay teachable and keep a beginner's mind that's open to new, because the mind doesn't like anything it isn't familiar with. But to keep open by feeding the spirit and getting my soul food. For me, AA is getting soul food. It's a soulful walk. It's not a journey of the head. I need to get soul food to nourish the soul. I go to the gym about 4 days a week to keep this 61-year-old body in shape. And I bike ride, a couple of days a week to keep this body in shape. But what about the soul? Am I working out in the AA gym? Am I working out with God, if you will, to keep the soul well? And so I hope to be teachable and to give this message away with the same love and gratitude that you give to me every time I walk into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Man, I'll tell you, God put something on my heart about a year ago, that the only thing he wants from me is my soul. When I look at the third step prayer, it's pretty much telling God, take my soul, my thinking and my actions, take the whole thing and rework it. You're the manufacturer. And I give God my soul with some reluctance, but I give God my soul, and he gives me a life. And because I was rudderless, and he gives me a life. And I give God my life, and he gives me a purpose. And I give God over and over and over again. I give God my sinfulness, and he gives me forgiveness. Forgives me of the guilt of my own sin. I gave God my drunkenness, and he gave me sobriety. And I give God my sobriety every morning. And he gives me Alcoholics Anonymous. And for this, I owe. For this, I'm overpaid. So I chop wood and carry water. And hopefully continue to be a member of good standing of a sacred place called Alcoholics Anonymous. That's all I got. Peace.